So while I set up my implements, and this is an example of maritime collaboration. He's running the slide for me. So I've been asked to speak about collaboration in the maritime domain, right? And therefore I thought it is best to put a map of the IOR. Those of you who have heard or read or seen the Indian Maritime Security Strategy document of 2015, this is a snapshot from that. I was fortunate to be a party to the revision, and I understand that the second revision is ongoing, which is due. But before I start, let me quote Henry Kissinger a couple of years back. I'm not a big fond fan of his, but some of his quotes are worth mentioning. He said, "We are living in dangerous times." And I think it's very apt today when we look at it. And if we are going to look at a Viksit Bharat in 2047, which is part of the remit given to me, 22 years are left for 2047. So let me take you back 22 years. Where were we? What have we done? I think we've done a lot. We've achieved a lot, but we have much more to go. And in this changing alignment of international relations, of Trump tariffs, of where relationships are going, of how perhaps Russia, India, China trilateral may again gain prominence, well, all due respect, Sri Parna, I think the rules-based order may be undergoing a change. But then again, there is a parallel narrative out there, and I will urge you who have not heard or read about it to read about what is called a deals-based order by a gentleman called Philip Shetler Jones. And you will find yourself a little bit enlightened. I will refer to it if I have time in India's case, where the deals-based order is actually on top of everything. So before I proceed further to my own notes, I'd just like to take you, this is the Indian Ocean region as we see it. There are 11 entry-exit choke points, starting from the Cape, Mozambique Channel, Bab el Mandab, right up to the Ombai-Weta Straits on the east. Some nations are lucky. I don't envy Indonesia. It's sitting atop 6 of them. And we are center-based around most of them. And all of them have a different implication insofar as the Indian Ocean region is concerned, and the Indo-Pacific in a general manner of speaking. There is a changing flux in how these choke points are being looked at and how they are looking at it. And the yellow dotted lines you see are the international shipping lines or the sea lines of communication, call it what you like. But there is a change in the pattern of slocks happening. So let me take you, and this slide is going to remain on for the rest of my presentation, so just kindly bear with me. Let's start with the South China Sea. Red big splot. Why? Because it troubles everybody. The last figure a couple of years ago was 55% of India's trade transits the South China Sea. I have not come across another bigger figure, but rest imagined, given the amount of maritime trade and the way we operate, that figure would have jumped. My best guess, it would come to 60-65%, which is a lot. You have it in the Bay of Bengal. There is a red spot there, essentially because of Myanmar and the situation in Bangladesh, North Arabian Sea. You have off the coast of Yemen, the Persian Gulf on top, the Bab el Mandab. The splotches have moved down south a bit. But let me concentrate on the Red Sea to give you an example of how we speak of maritime collaboration, but nothing happens. Houthis started targeting merchant ships. US came out with Prosperity Guardian. 3 NATO allies withdrew immediately. They were not part of Prosperity Guardian. You look at the EU endeavor of Operation Aspides, or Aspides, call it what you like. They are unable to tackle what the Houthis are doing today. So over a period of time, we've seen sea lines of communication are now routing along the eastern coast of Africa, straight from the Malacca, Lombok, Sunda, right towards the Cape. We see the slocks are now concentrating and flowing through the southern Indian Ocean region, which is one of the most unmonitored sea regions in the world. You never had a need to monitor it the way you need to do it now. So when slocks realign themselves, the attendant threats, risks, and challenges, do remember, will come to fore. Are we ready for this challenge? So there are gaps, but I'll come back to gaps a little later on. But let's look at what is the Indo-Pacific. If we are looking at the Indo-Pacific as a central entity for discussion, and the Indian Ocean region is the link between the Indo-Pacific and the Atlantic, and there's a very nice talk which is going on, I hope the term catches, which is called the Indo-Atlantic, which progresses to the western coast of Africa because we have interest there. So if you're going to go a step further from Indo-Pacific, we may be looking at something called the Indo-Atlantic a couple of years down the line, and that's worthy of remembering it. But what is the Indo-Pacific? So in 2018 at the Shangri-La Dialogue, our Prime Minister very clearly stated India's geographical extent of the Indo-Pacific, from the coast of Africa to the coast of Americas. Another big gap, South America. How much do we engage? It's an important continent. We need to look at it a bit more. But we somehow sort of shy away from it right now. But there is a dialogue being built up. So very few nations are aligned with that of India as far as geographical stretch is concerned. And I'll just name a few: Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria. Most of them are, European countries. And this is there was a sort of study carried out by the CFR, and this is a result of that. And then, of course, mainly nations align their view of the Indo-Pacific to the US, which is from the western coast of India onwards. So the major chunk of the Indo-Indian Ocean region, which is important to us, which is important to our outreach in the region, is generally left out of the engagement. We have had a number of Quad conferences. The foreign ministers have met recently in July. There's a lot of emphasis on maritime issues. But I think the main point is when the Leaders Summit takes place in Delhi or in India, wherever it happens, sometime I think later this year, we'll have a very clearer notion as to what is the US approach towards Quad, because that is an absent dialogue right now. US has been pointing fingers at various nations with this tariffs, trade, or whatever it is, which has had ripple effects in the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific. But to the region as a whole, we are not sure what is going to be the US approach. So hopefully, when the Leaders Summit takes place in India, we'll have certain clarity on this. So getting back to India's Indo-Pacific. So we look at what we call holistic maritime security. It's a term which flowed from the National Maritime Foundation, where I was for 5 years. We look at threats, challenges, risks, and opportunities. But the emphasis of our collaboration is the moniker preferred security partner and first responder. We looked at net security provider in the 2015 document because that was how it was, I would say, thrust upon us, but now we prefer this moniker, and I urge you to follow this. This is easier to define and is something we do on a daily basis. So we look at a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. And India was the first nation to use the word inclusive. Over a period of time, this word has found its place in the lexicon of Australia and Japan. So therefore, there is a sort of agreement on how we need to look at the Indo-Pacific and the Indian Ocean region. So what are the various threats, risks, challenges, opportunities? They are a mixture of traditional and hybrid, and I think today we have a taste of tradition on our borders and at sea. We've had recently Op Sindoor, but the hybrid is the most dangerous. I give you the example of the Houthis. How are we going to tackle this? There are too many international relations bindings which fall into place out here. We have relations with Iran. We have relations with Saudi Arabia. How will India sort of, decide which route to follow? And let me get back to the point of Viksit Bharat, that if we're looking to be a developed nation, then we need to decide which side of the fence we're going to step. You need to push the agenda, you need to be in the driver's seat. And I think that is the path towards maritime collaboration in the future, and I will give you certain examples why I say so. But if you're going to be a developed nation in 2047, then you need to take a stance and you need to be strong enough to uphold it. All right. The other is all maritime terrorism, crimes, piracy, disasters, pandemics. Non-combatant evacuation operations is important. We've been doing it on a daily basis. Let me give you the example of 2006 Lebanon. Indian task force crossed over from the Red Sea back into the Suez Canal into Red Sea, was told, go back, get your people out. 2006, Hezbollah and Israel were at each other. Both sides gave India a 4-hour ceasefire window. Come and take your people out. We took out not only our own people, we also took out people of other nationalities. 2015 Yemen, same issue. Foreign warships trying to enter Yemeni's waters to take out their people were fired at. I'm open to correction. There are serving admirals here, but I'd like to if you want, they can tell us some more about it. Many nations approached us and asked us, can you get our people out? We did. The point here is that NEO is something that is going to continue. Instability is establishing itself in the region. We have been fortunate, given India's standing in foreign policy and the acceptance of the Navy in foreign ports, that come and take your people out. The government in power has been able to give you that approval. Tomorrow, if there is no government in power, if it is an HADR or a pandemic come NEO situation, are we ready to put boots on ground? Can we do it alone? this is something we need to talk about. So the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium came out with an SOP for HADR, which has been adopted by IORA. I think we need to look at such situations also. This is one of the examples I can give where there exists a gap where maritime collaboration can be looked at. So today, in this region, we have a presence of over 40 navies. The number must have increased based on your anti-piracy patrols or your anti-Houthi patrols, and then you have CTFs and bilateral exercises which are increasing. There is the issue of bases and places. I'm not going to get into that debate, but we can look at it question answer. So China is the flavor of the season. Let me add another bit of flavor, Turkey. So if there is a gap in our engagements, let me give you the example of Somalia. Somalia, failed state, piracy, so much things to do. We should have gone in and helped them build the state, build their navy. We didn't. Turkey today sits in Somalia, training their navy, training their army. It has an MOU for maritime security of Somalia. It also has the permission to put in survey ships to assist Somalia in search of oil. Apparently, there is oil off the coast of Somalia. And more importantly, recently, Turkey asked for permission for a missile firing site in Somalia, which fires into the Indian Ocean region, something we do in the Bay of Bengal. So the question here is, will Turkey tomorrow turn around and say, my maritime footprint in IOR is perhaps equal to yours? Can I stake a claim to a chair in IONS or IORA? The problem here is, unlike China, where your strategic partners of the West will be able to stand by you, Turkey is a NATO ally. This is another example of a gap perhaps I can give you. Although we are engaging eastern coast of Africa, we've done our iOS saga recently. We've done it with the African nations. We've engaged ASEAN in maritime exercises, but I think we need to up the ante. We need to actually come to brass tacks that if something is going to happen, how are we going to look at it? Recently, China, and just I know Adam Bapna is going to talk about UNCLOS, in December 2024, if I get the date correct, recently promulgated its baselines for Scarborough Shoals, which means it is slowly creeping jurisdiction of maritime jurisdiction over waters. Along with baselines comes your airspace and ADIZs. So far, it is limited, as an example, in South China Sea. How long will it be for it to come into the Indian Ocean region with its assertive characteristics? India has recently promulgated baselines for the eastern coast of the Andaman Nicobars, which is a gap for a long bit of time. It is straight baselines. The US objects to it, but then again, we need to relook. Is this going to be a problem for us? How are we going to collaborate on maritime zones which emanate from these? We have corpats with 4 nations in the Bay of Bengal, which I think is another excellent example as far as maritime collaboration goes. So let me take you back to 2021, when we internationalized enhancing maritime security, when we were president of the Security Council, a case for international cooperation, and 5 principles were given. But my question is, after that, what happened? So recently, we've had another discussion in the Security Council by another nation on maritime issues again. So the follow-up is again a gap. We need to be in the driver's seat. If we're going to push these agendas, if we're going to push the agenda, for example, of the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, in which maritime security is an important pillar, then we need to actually be on the driver's seat. So let me get back to what are our maritime contours. So if I take Sagar, and now Mahasagar as the umbrella term, then under that we are going to operate under certain packets, and the first of all is neighborhood first policy. Go back to the slide. Our neighborhood policy is facing tremendous challenges. We have a challenge in Bangladesh, we have a challenge in Myanmar, and I'll explain why Myanmar in a bit. We've got over the Sri Lankan episode. Maldives is almost back in shaking hands with India, and we give it enough time. And therefore, the same applies to our Look West policy, to our Act East policy. Minilateralism, I think, is where we need to focus on maritime collaboration. Sripanna, give me a 1-minute sounder. Okay, so with our neighbors, the Indian Navy is engaged in 4 corpats, around 20, and I don't remember the figure, we do so many that the number is out of count now, 20 institutionalized bilateral exercises and at least 20 plus multilateral exercises. We need to up the ante every time when we engage various nations on this issue, whether it be through the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium or whether it be through IORA, through the Maritime Security and Safety Pillar. We are going to be the chair coming November. So we can either look to a stronger vice chair. My best bet would be Australia or France. These are nations we work with very well, and therefore we will be able to push certain maritime collaborative issues out there. Since I mentioned Myanmar, let me just jump to that. Those of you who remember Piracy 1.0 will remember the famous measles map and the high-risk area that came right up to the western coast of India, and it took us 5 years to get it back to a smaller state. Insurance premiums went through the roof. In the Bay of Bengal, it's not that now that the HRA is done away with from 1st Jan 2023, if I remember correctly, it's not that insurance premiums are not high. Lloyd's monitors it. So they came out with something which is called a Rakhine Advisory. And this was September 2024, where Lloyd's, the JWC, said that situation in Myanmar's ports and underways continues to deteriorate. You need to look at this. But the interesting part of the paragraph where it said the competition between India and China and Myanmar may add to it. It's a very interesting paragraph. So therefore, underwriters of insurance may take note of this. So it's not that your insurance perils for maritime trade are over. They will continue. And so these are certain areas and certain gaps which I thought I would highlight. But let me get back to deals-based orders since I mentioned, and this is my last point. We were asked by the US to stop taking oil from Iran. So if you look at the oil imports of 2018, 2019, that was perhaps the last year Iran figured on the top 10 nations from which we imported oil as per USD percentage. Was there a deal? I don't know. We have been asked to stop taking oil from Russia some time back, but then the US said, you can continue. Was there a deal behind it? I don't know. Because the petroleum products which we export after refining from our oil imports accounts for India's 17% GDP, which is important. But today, again, we are facing the same situation. We are being asked to stop taking oil from Russia, or we will face sanctions from the same nations who also take various stuff and oils from Russia. So when you, and then of course there is the issue of dark ships, and whether we are taking oil that comes in dark ships and all, but that's a separate argument we can discuss during question and answers. So there are gaps. But having said that, there is something we are doing right. Otherwise, why would the whole world want to engage with us as far as the maritime domain is concerned? I was in Perth last week. We're talking UDA. Underwater domain awareness. We have MDA. IFC-IOR is a globally accepted, recognized institution doing a lot of good work. The next step is UDA. So there is a lot of collaboration insofar as technology and covering of all this is concerned. As I said, 22 years, we got a lot of miles to cover. Thank you.